of Princess Sophia, it's because her scandal was too ruinous to get out. She had a secret love child, and the identity of the father could have toppled the kingdom. As a daughter of King George III and Queen Charlotte, Princess Sophia should have had the world at her feet. Instead, she lived in a near-lifelong lockdown, thanks to a family riddled with illness, fear, and scandal. Born November 3, 1777, Sophia was the fifth daughter of King George III and Queen Charlotte, and the 12th child out of a whopping 15. The king was especially thrilled to have another girl in the family, as he'd always preferred his daughters to his sons. She was a delightful, though moody girl, with a passionate nature and sympathy for the less fortunate. Once, when her father read her a news article about poor conditions for starving prisoners, Sophia donated her allowance to buy them bread. In 1788, Sophia witnessed a nightmare. Her father suffered the first of several mental breakdowns that changed her family forever. After likely suffering an attack of the blood disease porphyria, or bipolar disorder, the king began rambling for hours on end, sometimes foaming at the mouth in the process. The distraught queen grew terrified of her husband and kept her daughters close. She moved Sophia and her sisters into her bedroom, where she insisted they sleep with her every night. Soon, Sophia's mother and eldest brother, George IV, then the Prince of Wales, began fighting over who'd get to be regent should the government declare the king unfit to rule. Charlotte even accused her son of conspiring with doctors to deem the king permanently insane, and frequently denied him access to his father in retaliation. Soon after, the king's condition improved the following year, but the queen sank into such a depression that she was no longer benignly maternal. She was so suspicious and quick to anger that Sophia began to fear her and learned to tiptoe around her dark moods. In 1792, at the age of 14, Sophia made her debut at court, but eligible crushes would have been hard to spot, thanks to her biggest insecurity. She hated how she looked in her glasses. She was nearsighted, but refused to wear specs in public because she was afraid the papers would mention them. In the summer of 1793, Sophia began to have trouble swallowing. Scariest still, she'd have anywhere between 50 and 80 convulsions and fainting spells every day. People worried this meant she had inherited her father's illness, and that soon she too would face a mental decline. Sophia never did develop mental health issues, but that doesn't mean her childhood got any better. With her father seeming to always teeter on insanity, her mother kept Sophia and her other young daughters on the tightest leash imaginable. The girls were almost never allowed out of the palace and met precious few new people. Sophia once said her days were so deadly dull, she wished herself a kangaroo. No idea what that means. Royal decree meant that none of the king's daughters could marry without his consent, which he definitely wasn't up to giving. As a result of this and her isolation, Sophia mostly only had court pages or equerries to flirt with. In 1797, Sophia got a peek at what the outside world might look like when her big sister Charlotte married Frederick, hereditary Prince of Württemberg. He was overweight, had an illegitimate child, and his earlier wife had died under strange circumstances. But beggars can't be choosers. Unfortunately, Charlotte's marriage did nothing to open the door for Sophia and her other sisters. It only left them more starved for their own male attention. Sophia and her brother, the future George IV, stayed close throughout her life. As he was one of the only people able to defy their mother, Sophia and her sisters constantly begged him to break them out of their convent lifestyle and help them find husbands. For now, though, there was little George could do, though he promised he'd try when he came into power. George IV's marriage to Caroline of Brunswick was an unhappy one for both parties, but even after the union all but crashed and burned, Sophia stayed friends with Caroline and hung around her circles. Sophia was friends with one of Caroline's lady friends, Frances Garth. By 1798, The young princess had a crush on Frances's uncle Thomas Garth, who happened to also be her father's equerry. Soon, Sophia and Thomas were a secret item, with Frances acting as their go-between. In truth, Garth wasn't exactly a catch. He was 33 years Sophia's senior, but the love-starved girl looked right past that. Not all historians agree that Sophia became pregnant with Garth's child. Her mother, Queen Charlotte, likely found out, and after a probable bout of fury, knew she had one job and one job only: to keep the truth from the frail King George III at all costs. Her idea was farcical, and it worked. For the next months, Sophia's condition was an open secret to many in the palace, except the reigning monarch. They told the king that Sophia had a bad case of dropsy, which explained any bloating, and sent her far away to Weymouth to recover. According to some evidence, Sophia gave birth to a child named Thomas in August of 1800, and his biological father ended up raising him away from the prying eyes of the royal court. Historians suggest that Sophia and Garth might have made a secret trip to the altar, and point to a portrait of Sophia wearing a wedding ring as proof. Unfortunately, Garth's insufficient rank meant a real royal union could never take place. Around this time, Sophia's father, King George, suffered further lapses into mania. He would often not recognize his own children, howl like a monkey, and generally walk around making inappropriate remarks. During these fits of madness, King George made wildly inappropriate advances toward Sophia, which she seemed to partly blame on her mother's coldness toward him in the bedroom. He was frequently overcome with passionate lunges, and the poor girl could only describe his behavior delicately as an over-kindness which greatly alarms me. King George's girls were now full-blown adults, but very few of them led adult lives. This was especially true of Sophia's youngest sister, Amelia, who was their father's favorite, until tragedy struck. Like Sophia, Amelia had always been sickly, and in 1810, when she was just 27, she died after a prolonged illness. Amelia's death was the straw that broke King George's mind completely. Amelia's nurse described how, in the wake of her death, George exhibited scenes of distress and crying every day, and was consumed with a melancholy beyond description. Sophia watched from the sidelines as her father slipped beyond her reach. In 1811, with King George III incapable of ruling, Sophia's brother George IV officially became Prince Regent. One of the first things he did with his new power was increase his sister's annual allowances so that Sophia and her siblings could have some independence. Yet, as with everything that came into Sophia's life, this was a double-edged sword. During this time, Sophia's mother, Queen Charlotte, was enraged that her son was undoing decades of her work, keeping her daughters away from the world. She fought furiously with him, as well as with her daughters, to keep them from breaking free. Sophia's brother made good on his promises to free his sisters as best he could when he had the power to, and for some of them, it worked. One of her older sisters, Mary, wed a duke at the ripe age of 40 just to get out of the palace, while another, Augusta, secured the regent's permission to privately marry a longtime lover. But Sophia, even as the youngest of her sisters, now that Amelia was gone, remained without a husband. However, as she neared her mid-30s, she developed a new and scandalous crush. The royal doctor, Henry Halford, was so attentive and solicitous to her that the princess, still as starved for affection as ever, couldn't help but fall in love with the married man. It was a lonely existence, and it was about to get lonelier. Sophia had always been close with her brother George's wife, Caroline of Brunswick, and she was equally close with their daughter, her niece Charlotte. So in 1817, when Caroline of Brunswick perished in childbirth, the blow must have been crippling. Just a year later, in 1818, Sophia lost the driving force of her life, her mother, Queen Charlotte. The queen had controlled and cajoled Sophia and her sisters since birth, but existence without her must have been unthinkable too. Sophia's father, King George III, had been blind, insane, and cooped up inside Windsor Castle for nearly a decade. Yet he'd survived many of his family members. But in 1820, he died after spending Christmas babbling for 58 hours straight. Sophia settled into her royal old maid role with alarming comfort. Her brother George IV was king for a decade until 1830, and made sure she lived in comfort. When he died, her other brother, William, took over, and the family continued to dote on their baby sister. Around the time of William's reign, Sophia lived beside her niece, the future Queen Victoria, and the girl's mother, the Duchess of Kent. The Duchess was under the sway of her comptroller, a cunning and exacting man named Sir John Conroy, and Sophia soon fell under his sway. Conroy was influential, but little Victoria also detested him. After all, he and her mother had devised an incredibly strict upbringing for the young girl, and Conroy could be as sleazy and sycophantic as they come. Surprise, surprise! Sophia had bad taste in men. Then again, she may have had a good reason to team up with Conroy. In 1828, Sophia's past came back to haunt her in the worst way possible. Her alleged love child, Tommy Garth, came out of the woodwork with reportedly incriminating documents of his parents' relationship. More than that, he threatened to expose Sophia's youthful indiscretions unless the royal family paid him a massive sum of money. According to some, it was none other than John Conroy who swooped in to shut down Tommy's fascinations, and either way, the young man eventually gave up his blackmail scheme. Whatever the case, Conroy so impressed Sophia, she soon even let him control her finances. This was a terrible idea. Thanks to Sophia, Conroy lived a lavish lifestyle, squandering her money mostly on himself. But that wasn't even the worst part. People described how, by this time, the princess had become dizzy, easily muddled, and was a confused, nearly blind aunt. Because Conroy knew the powerful Princess Victoria hated him, he got Sophia to spy on the girl whenever he was out of town and report back to him. Victoria was not pleased with this when she learned of it, and kept Sophia at arm's length forever after. One of the other speculations about Sophia's rumored love child is that Thomas Garth wasn't the father. Instead, some say the baby's father was actually her brother, Ernest, the Duke of Cumberland. Ernest had an infamously vulgar and aggressive appetite for women, and as a soldier, even once wanted to raid a convent. Everyone in the palace knew about Ernest's rough ways, but Sophia herself made the darkest confession of all. In her letters to her lover, Thomas Garth, she complained about her brother's attempts with her. On the morning of May 27, 1848, Sophia became gravely ill, and the 70-year-old princess was dead by 6:30 in the evening. Her niece, now Queen Victoria, had been presiding over her own birthday reception when Sophia died. For a woman who'd spent her life in the shadow of others, it's nice that Sophia got to steal someone else's thunder, just once. Thanks for watching History Expose. If you love uncovering the best stories in history, hit like and subscribe to keep exploring with us. Don't forget to visit our main page, Factornate, for more incredible facts about everything.